But what happens in most interviews that we have, including this one, obviously, is we drill into the details without getting the big picture. And I feel at some point it's important that we get the big picture, right? And once we understand the big picture, then we can start drilling in the details, and you'll find all the details fit into that big picture.
So this is part 3 of this video. I thought there was only half an hour left of the interview, but there's not. There's a whole nother hour left of the interview. I might skip some parts, but I want to get a full understanding of what his belief is, and I don't know nothing of what his belief is. His belief is just, I'm going to lead people to God, but I'm not going to explain who God is and the details about God. And what is this big picture that he's talking about? This is supposed to be talking about reincarnation and all his detailed beliefs as to why reincarnation isn't the truth, and yet he didn't say anything about why it isn't the truth. He's just saying that the bigger picture is the bigger picture, and yet he's not saying what the bigger picture is. You can't know the details until you know the bigger picture, and I'm not actually going to tell you what the bigger picture is. Okay, well, maybe he's going to say the bigger picture later on. Let's continue with this interview. And
I think that's an important way to approach many questions. But it is fascinating to answer the detailed questions. But you will always find when you answer them that there will always be big picture questions that appear as a result of the answer to those questions.
Oh gosh, this is so annoying. How can so many people present sort of like truth but not actually say any truth, but just talk about the bigger picture without talking about the bigger picture? Just say that the bigger picture is important and then say, well, we can't talk about the details until you know what the bigger picture is, but I'm not going to tell you what the bigger picture is, so I'm not going to bother telling you what the details is. Oh, there's so many people that talk like this, and it's very frustrating.
Yeah. So my answer, for example, to the reincarnation issue brings up a lot more questions. Well, why do people seem like they have another life or have memories from another life? Or, you know, why is it that certain children repeat things that people who have died used to say, and all these kind of things? There's completely logical answers to all of those kind of questions that do not require that you believe in reincarnation. So I feel sometimes, though, that people like to believe in certain things because it gives them some sense that their own internal confusion right now can be almost ignored or allayed, rather than them having to consistently seek for truth.
So in answer to your question, well, there's loads of people that have past life experiences and memories and things, and that they're all just doing it to just build up their ego. And me calling myself Jesus and Christ and, you know, the one who can lead you to God, the one who has the answers about the spiritual realm, you know, I'm not saying all this to build up my ego. No, people who believe in reincarnation, they are just saying what they want to build up sort of control, to believe that they know who they were in their past life, you know. And I'm creating up my Jesus character, not because I want to know who I was in my past life, but just because I am presenting you the truth, but no one else is, only me.
People like to believe in certain things because it gives them some sense that their own internal confusion right now can be almost ignored or allayed, rather than them having to consistently seek for truth.
Oh, this is just like such a typical human way of thinking. So annoying. It's like they believe what they're doing is correct, but what other people are doing, even though it's exactly the same as what they're doing, you know, that's not correct. You know, he, I believe, is the Jesus of Nazareth. So if he talks about his past life as the Jesus of Nazareth, I do think that he is connecting with his past life. But I think anyone who talks about their past life, and you know what, I have heard people say that they think that they were a farmer in a past life, or they think that they were an air pilot in their past life. You know, I have heard people say this kind of stuff. In this other video that this atheist channel makes about a response to kind of like this interview, but in a few days' time, you know, they make another video about this, and you know, they say that, you know, they've never heard people talk about their past life as like a poo scraper or something. And you know what, I'm sure no one would really want to remember that life, so if people are blanking out that, I'm pretty sure I know why they would blank it out. But yeah, I have heard people claim to just be a normal person in their past life experience. I haven't heard many past life experiences, but I have heard probably about 10 people's experiences. But yeah, this guy thinking that only he has had a past life experience and only his past life experience is a true experience, and everyone else, they're just making things up. You don't have to believe in reincarnation just because lots of other people say that reincarnation is true, even though I'm talking about my past life, hence I'm also saying that reincarnation is true. Just ignore what I'm saying. I think he is the one who's spiritually confused. That is what I'm saying. And I think he's spiritually confused because he's raised as a Christian, he's surrounded by Christians, and Christians don't actually believe in reincarnation, so he's blocking out that part of what he's saying because he doesn't want to lose his Christian following. And if he's supposed to have a Christian following, then maybe he shouldn't actually be promoting reincarnation.
Their own internal confusion right now can be almost ignored or allayed in their life.
We'll go against the Nag Hammadi Gnostic texts, I guess. They kind of had some kind of belief in reincarnation, so scribble that out. But
can I just say, though, I'm not suggesting to anybody that they scribble out anything that they have discovered up until now. What I'm suggesting is that there are answers to many of their questions that give them an alternate answer rather than the belief they may have imbibed, thinking that that is the only answer to those questions. And this is something that I feel humanity does very frequently, and even scientists do it very frequently, where, they all sort of focus in on one area or endeavour of study, and in that process, you ignore the other areas or endeavours of study.
What are you talking about? This isn't making any sense. You're saying that if people are trying to say that reincarnation is the truth, that doesn't mean that reincarnation is the truth, because there are other ways of looking at things, there are other explanations for something, and yet you aren't giving any other explanations. What other explanation is there for someone saying that I was this person in my past life and now I'm this person? I believe I was a Leah in my past life. Now, are you going to tell me that there's other excuses or other things that my belief could be pointing to? You can't tell me that me believing that I was a Leah in my past life is based on any experience that I have, because I don't think that I was a Leah based on any experience that I have. I believe that I was her because I was believing that I was Christ, and I felt like my higher self was telling me that I was her. And even my past life, it made sense, because there's 3 temples of Christ, so there's 3 lives of Christ. That's me. I believe what I believe because of the Bible, because of religion, because of a million things, but experiences based on my feelings isn't actually why I believe it. There's lots more to it. And Aliyah means return to Israel, and I believe that I am Israel. And she was born on January the 16th, which is the day after Passover, Passover being January the 15th, the 15th day of the first month. The Jordanian calendar is my calendar, and if I'm God, then that is my calendar, I guess.
And doing that is very damaging to yourself personally, because you will begin to imbibe beliefs that you may then have to adjust later on, or you may even change your whole life. Many of you, I know historically.
It's true that believing that I was both Eve and Aliyah did change my whole life. I mean, it completely ruined my whole life. Why? Because Aliyah had such a better life than mine. I went to Sylvia Young Theatre School. I really wanted to be a singer. I did have a dream once that I was her. So yes, okay, I have one experience of being her. I didn't think that I was her at the time. I just thought I had a dream about her, and then I turned on the TV the next day to find that she'd actually died that day. I had very little memory of Aliyah, but I do remember that. But I felt like the dream was actually just telling me that I had a good chance of being a singer. I didn't think it was telling me that I was that girl. I just thought that it was saying that if I keep my dreams up, then maybe I will become a singer. And yeah, that didn't happen. But being a singer and doing what she did, that was my dream when I was at Sylvia Young, when I had that dream. And but yeah, it did ruin my life. Not the dream, but the time in 2013, October 10th, when I was listening to her songs and I just looked into her eyes and I just got this strong message, she is me. That ruined my life. And I'm sure you can say the same thing when you realised that, or believed that you were Jesus and fully took on the responsibility of wanting to promote yourself as that. You probably did change your whole life because you realised that actually people don't give a shit about Jesus. They just want someone with magical powers to come down and save them. So I'm sure you went through the same sort of abuse that I went through, but you have managed to actually create some sort of following, so you've got some sort of support, whereas with me, I just feel like everyone is ignoring me, like I'm invisible or something. So I've had a far worse experience than what you went through.
And that caused you to change a lot of your life, even during those time periods, only to later perhaps regret that, because you realize new things that you've discovered that don't match the old things you were being taught.
Yeah, I think you're talking about your future experience. One day you're going to come across the fact that Christ and Jesus are actually two different people. You're Jesus, I'm Christ. We're not the same person. You're just kind of like mimicking me in a sort of way. You've had a taster of what I've gone through. It's not a nice thing to go through. But yeah, we've had very different lives, because my life has been a nightmare most of my life. And yeah, anyway.
And so I feel with all discovery, we need to be in an open state where we allow ourselves to discover more and more truthful information.
Exactly. So stop insulting reincarnation. Stop thinking that only you have been reincarnated. You know, if you opened yourself up to the fact that other people have been reincarnated too, then you would feel differently, and you would realize actually you are not really in the truth. But yeah, I feel like you have to think that you're special, because this is what is encouraging you to promote yourself as being Jesus. You know, if you thought that everyone had been reincarnated, you probably wouldn't bother. You know, I've always believed in reincarnation. I didn't know who I was in my past life, but if I had have known who I was in my past life, I don't think I would have really been that bothered. I think though, because Aaliyah was actually famous, she had a good career, or at least she would have had a good career if she didn't have died so young. You know, that was it was horrible to feel like I could have had so much and it was all taken away from me, and then I had to just be poor basically because no one was talking to me. You know, it was a very, very horrible experience. But I feel like you're going to have a little bit of a horrible experience when you realize that actually reincarnation is the truth, and that you actually should be talking about yourself right now. You know, you should be listening to yourself. You should be more open-minded to the fact that reincarnation is the truth, and that if someone claimed to be a certain person, they might actually be telling the truth. I feel like you might have heard a few cases about people claiming to be Jesus in the past life, in their past life, and so maybe this is your reason why you don't believe in reincarnation, because you are looking at these people and thinking, well, if they are lying about who they were in their past life, then there's probably a lot of people who lie about their past lives. But yeah, if someone's claiming to just be a farmer in their past life, then I feel like there's less chance of that being not the truth. Although just because you do think you know who you were in your past life, that doesn't mean it's the truth. I feel like you have to, you know, have a sense of like visions maybe. But if you though feel like you're in the wrong sex and you want to get a sex change, or if you're just gay and you fancy the same sex, you know, I feel like this is you bringing out memories from your past life when you were a different sex, hence why you feel the way that you feel. Therefore, AJ right now is just being quite close-minded to the fact that other people are right too. And
that does require at times throwing away information that is found to be false. And I suppose in some ways, because I've lived 2,000 years, I've been able to watch people who have believed in reincarnation during that time and see the damages that it's had on their life after they've passed. And I've also been able to watch Christians over that 2,000 years of time and see the damage that that has also incurred on their life. Okay, so you believe you've literally been watching people for the last 2,000 years. Yeah, I don't believe that one bit. I'm God. I haven't been watching people. Well, I do. I mean, I've had a few visions. I had a vision actually of John in the wilderness being given the vision about Babylon the Great. I feel like I've had a vision of that, and I feel like I've had a few visions, but keep having this memory of trying to hug David. I don't know, the guy who plays Angel in Buffy. I've had a few visions of me trying to like hug him, but like going through him like I'm a ghost or something. I've probably watched him a bit, but I definitely wouldn't say that I remember being in the spirit realm and watching over people. So I think you're telling porkies right now. Even after they've passed. So, you know, what I find myself is that unless you believe the actual factual truth as God can demonstrate it to us, you will always be disappointed, and you will always be going down roads that eventually end up to be dead ends that you must then turn around and travel back up again before you can go down another road. And I think it's very important for us as humans to realize that there are some fundamental truths that we can generally all agree on, and then begin investigation and be very open-minded about all forms of investigation. What I find is that many people on Earth are only interested in the physical forms of investigation. Now,
well, what other forms are there? You can't be like, I'm going to talk to God in the spirit to get answers about the physical. No, you need to talk to God in the physical to get answers about the physical, because that is physical evidence. You need to talk to God, yes, but you need to talk to the physical God about the spiritual stuff, and she will give her view on things. And yeah, my spiritual knowledge, I guess, is kind of shit because I don't actually know, but if I don't know, then I don't think that you know either. But I would analyse that part of the spiritual is actually the psychological and why people are doing what they're doing. You know, you are promoting lies, but I see why you're doing it, because you want to build up a following, and I feel like you must build up a following, because spiritually that is what you are designed to do. You have all these visions that you believe is the truth, and I think they're the truth too, and you want to get people to believe in you, so you're willing to tell a few lies about how you were watching over people, when I don't think that part was actually true. But you have to say something to get people interested in you. I'm being too honest about the fact that I don't know, and no one seems to be interested in me, so maybe my honesty is actually just causing people to not want to believe in me.
Humanity, up to now, scientists have now proven that around 90% of the universe is dark. They can't see it. They've measured its weight, and they realize that there's all these things that you cannot see that exist. And so we now need to start going, well, if that's the case, then it probably means 90% of our investigations need to focus more upon the things we can't see than the things we can.
The idea of using things that you can't see as evidence to back up proof of something that is real, I feel like is just a bit crazy, because if you can't see it, then it's not real evidence, right? But yes, the spiritual side of things is that you are Jesus and you need to promote faith, and faith is the belief in something that can't be proven. So you need to promote things that can't be proven and don't have any sort of real physical evidence of. That is part of your role. So yes, keep doing you. The universe is full of 90% of darkness, but we know that the universe is real, and likewise 90% of evidence is not seen, but we know that it is real. Just because we know that there's darkness in the universe, and 90% of it is darkness, but that too is also real. So therefore it's proof that we must look at things we can't see as evidence. What I think you really need to do is wait for God, who will come and only believe something if she sees evidence. Okay, sometimes I might want to believe things that might not be proven. You know, I could believe that this cake isn't going to make me gain weight. Is that the truth? Probably not, but I want to believe it. But you know what? It's not important, okay? I can eat this frickin' cake and it doesn't matter if I gain weight. Sometimes you don't need to know the truth, but sometimes you do need to know the truth. And if something is serious, you know, you need to look at real evidence. This is why I don't like people who talk about the spirit realm and lie about it. Why? Because I want to know about the spirit realm. So if you believe you've had a life or death experience, you know, I would like to know the truth about it. And I'm going to find it very hard to believe people if the majority of people are talking about how they've seen God and they also saw him with a beard and a big deep voice and stuff like this. You know, I can't believe anyone because there's so many people saying this kind of shit. And therefore, if someone was to tell me that I need to believe in things that can't be seen, I'm just like, fuck you. It's actually for this reason that I think it would be a good idea to find out about the spiritual realm, but first not tell the people that God is female, and then listen to these experiences. And you know, if people start saying that they've had life or death experiences and then start talking about how they saw God who was male, well, you know that they're a liar. Now if they start saying something different, well, that's more truthful then. But yeah, once you've exposed the truth that God is female and prefers to be female, and people might just change their story and just be like, oh well, I don't think I actually saw a beard, I actually think it was, yeah, it was a female, it was just a very masculine female, you know. Yeah, that's definitely Anna, you know. Anna's very masculine, you know. I can definitely see that side of her. I don't want people to just switch their story when they know the truth, you know. I want to actually suss out who the liars are.
It is easy to investigate things we can see, but much more difficult to investigate things you can't see unless you know how to do that.
By that, what you really mean is that if you investigate things you can't see and then come up with some sort of conclusion, well, no one can disprove you because they can't see it, hence they can't disprove you because they can't see the conclusion. That kind of reminds me of the atom being split. Like, I have no idea what's going on with this atom being split. You know, how can you film something that's so small? How do you know something's been split? If you're whizzing it round a big CERN, how do you know whereabouts in the CERN machine it is? You know, it's not like you can actually stick like some sort of tracer on it. I mean, it's an atom, it's so tiny. How would you know where it is? How would you know if it splits? You know, I don't really understand this. I mean, that to me sounds like an example of something that can't be proven, and they're just saying that something is being happened, but really, because you can't see it, you can't actually prove if it did happen or not. I mean, I don't know science, and I haven't seen the evidence. If I saw it, if I knew what they were doing, maybe I'd understand it, but right now I can't see it, and I don't know what they're doing, so I can't understand it. And that is kind of what faith is. I don't understand how someone dying and rising again can save mankind and get God to forgive them of their sins and things that they've chosen to do. You know, this doesn't make any sense to me. But I guess because you are here to promote faith, this is why you are saying rubbish.
There are other people around and that think that they are Jesus returned. There's a fellow in Russia. I don't know much about him, but I hear he's impressive. I saw Reverend Moon several times, and I know many of his followers. Do you think it's possible that all these people are right?
The reality is I've met many hundreds of thousands of people who claim to be me.
Really? That doesn't sound believable at all. I tried to do a little search to find these Jesuses because I wanted to add them to like a top 10 list. But the YouTube videos that I found, well, they actually mostly talked about people that were dead. One from Russia died in 2013. Another one, that An one, he didn't say that he had died, but in the video that I watched 2 days ago, the presenter said that he actually died in 85. One of them was in prison for having sex with teenagers. Another one was in prison for trying to kill Obama. You know, I don't think there's that many of these Jesuses around unless I just have done a really bad search. But I would like to find these people because I would like to raise up an army of crazy Jesuses. You know, I'm Christ, I'm the real Christ, and these people are kind of mocking me in a way, and so I'd like to kind of do a comparison. But the problem is the people that I found are either dead or just so crazy that I don't want to have anything to do with them. So I really don't believe that you've met loads of these people, but hey, maybe you can help me find some of these people if this is the truth. Or are you talking about like in the spiritual realm and just things that are probably not the truth?
In the spirit world, there are literally millions of people who claim to be me. And I've met many of them in an attempt to help them see they're not actually me. But usually it hasn't resulted very well, obviously. But in the spirit world, there are millions of people who claim to be me. Many of them attempt to channel information to people who are mediums on Earth. There are methods that you can hear people, spirits, speaking to you.
You know, I don't believe that this is the truth, but on the other hand, I think Jesus actually represents the average person. Therefore, there is truth to what he's saying. Even though he's lying about the spirit realm, I feel like there is truth to what he's saying because, well, in the spirit realm, people know, souls there know that Jesus actually just represents the average person. So anyone in the spirit realm, well, they're the average person in that realm, and they're just like, hey, Jesus, hey, Jesus, hey, Jesus. Well, I'm not actually saying that that's actually happening. I'm just making a joke about it. But yeah, there's some truth to it, is what I'm saying. If you want to do a little practical joke on this guy, that would actually be a really funny joke. You take him to a studio, you talk about how he's Jesus and stuff, and then over the 6 to 9 month period, you let him promote himself as being the Jesus. And then just before I'm about to expose myself as being, you know, the real Christ, you can set up a little comedy sketch where you have just lots of people walking past calling each other Jesuses. And he can be like, no, I'm Jesus. No, I'm Jesus. No, I'm Jesus. No, I'm Jesus. And then you can be like, yeah, do you want to meet Christ? Yeah, not Jesus. This is Christ. And then you can have a discussion with me. I don't know. That's just a funny idea. I'd say you could do it with Muhammad, but they kind of do it with each other every single day, you know. Hey, Muhammad. Hey, Muhammad. Hey, Muhammad. You know, there's so many Muhammads there. But yeah, it'd be funny if you did the same thing with the Jesuses.
And in fact, many people with schizophrenia do actually hear actual people talking to them who exist in the spirit world.
Maybe, maybe not. You do know that schizophrenia is a mental illness, right?
And so there are many ways you can actually hear people talking to you from the spirit world while you're living on Earth.
Yeah, I think there's a few ways. You know, one way could be to like get a baseball bat, whack yourself in the head, maybe you'll start hearing voices. Another way is to do mushrooms or take drugs. You know, you might start hearing voices if you do that. There are a few ways, you know, hallucinations, mental illness, drugs, or perhaps even like convince yourself that something's real when it's not. I mean, you're not doing that right now.
And many of the people you mentioned are overcloaked by these spirits who claim themselves to be Jesus. They are not Jesus. I am, but obviously.
I think you've actually met. Have you met them? You and Mary went to Mexico and met the Mexican Jesus, or you? Just from memory.
I've met a few people on Earth who've claimed themselves to be Jesus and had discussions with them, but not the ones you've mentioned. No.
Right.
But in the end of the day, all of them, it can be proven that they are not, and it's quite easy when...
I don't think it's easy to prove that someone isn't Jesus, because technically I think Jesus is just an average person, and I think that God and the Spirit is the person who has created the Bible and formed it in the way that it's supposed to be formed, and Jesus was just a sort of figure that was used to inspire writers. So technically Jesus could be anyone, but I feel like there are a lot of Jesuses on Earth that are completely crazy, and I can't really understand why God would use those people as a figure to inspire, you know, a really serious book that's going to kind of shape the whole world and guide people to the real Christ. I would use someone like you. Okay, I don't think you're full of truth, but I like the fact that you think you're full of truth. But yeah, I wouldn't use the others because I feel like they're too crazy, but I feel like you're just the right kind of crazy, if that makes sense. You could call me crazy for choosing you, but to be honest, I would have just chosen someone else that was similar to you, and there probably are a few. Maybe I haven't found them because I'm not meant to, but I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Like, for example, a person who claims to be Jesus is going to have had a history of 2,000 years, not just a history of a few years in the first century, 30 or so years in the first century, and then a big gap of nothing, and then a life in this life.
Actually, I'm pretty certain that that is what happened, but you don't want people to believe that because you think that they won't believe your story, they won't believe that you're Jesus if you just say that. So I feel like you come up with this whole spiritual story to try and back up your truth, which is fine by me. I don't mind. I am the real Christ. I wasn't on Earth before Leah until 23,000 BC, so a very long time ago, and I can't tell you anything that happened in between these dates because I have no clue. And it scared me when I first found out that I was a cave woman a very long time ago and that my soul is probably extremely old. Like, I've always felt like my soul was far older than Earth and perhaps even the MW. That thought scares me, but I do feel like it's the truth. And then when I saw all this evidence that I was the real Christ, it did freak the hell out of me. And I don't think you would possibly understand how scary that is to not know things. But maybe you do. And maybe that's why you're trying to come up with some belief as to where you have been. Because the thought of just being nowhere for 2,000 years scares you, that you've kind of come up with a story as to what's happened. I think I was slightly comforted by the thought that I was Aaliyah because technically she died when I was 12, hence proving that I do live outside of time. Now, if I live outside of time, then technically time is kind of irrelevant because I can time travel. Now, if you didn't experience that part because none of your past lives were, alive when you were alive, you wouldn't have that same ability to believe that you do live outside of time. So you might have come up with the sort of spiritual story just to try and understand something you don't understand. But with me, I'm freaking scared out of what's happening, that I want to stick to the truth. And if there's something that I don't know, I would rather say that I don't know it than try and say that I do know it and say something that isn't necessarily the truth. And the truth is that I've always had a fascination with time travel and with the past. I loved going around to National Trust properties and trying to visualize what things were like in the past. And, I know this is my mortal self doing this, but I feel like, in a way, as I was doing this, my higher self was doing a similar kind of thing, only she was actually time traveling, only I wasn't really connected to what my higher self was doing.
Now, every one of the people you mentioned they don't remember their spirit life because they actually didn't have one. And so, you know, the reality is they are just regurgitating information from spirit sources through channels. Not all of that information is false, of course, and it is the opinion of those spirits that they are telling the truth in many cases, but they are not, because they don't know the truth to tell.
Neither do you, must I add, but whatever, keep talking.
And so when I see these kind of events happening, and this happens very often on Earth, many people who have that relationship with spirits are classified as mentally unstable, of course, in some way. And in some ways, they can be mentally unstable because it's like they are two different people.
You're right there. Being two different people definitely causes mental instability. I feel like I'm wondering if this is where part of my dyslexia comes from. Often I feel like I'm saying one thing, but I keep changing some of the words to make it look like I'm about to say something else. You know, I'm wondering if this is a sort of two-mind problem. But yeah, I'm highly intelligent and I can't be classed as mentally ill because of the rational way of thinking. But yeah, they don't have that sort of rational part. But hey, a lot of people are made in my image, even crazy people. And maybe the reason why there's so many crazy people on Earth is because I have some sort of crazy elements to me, yes. But you're definitely not sure in that area, because I'm pretty sure you're lying about things, and you know you're lying about things, and yet you're still saying it. So anyway, we all have our mental instabilities, I guess. Just don't think that you're different to everyone else. Having said that, though, I guess you need to believe that you're different from everyone else, otherwise you wouldn't be promoting yourself as being Jesus. Life can be quite complicated at times, I know.
They are one person when they are not connected to the spirit they're talking to, and then when they let the spirit overcloak them and change their behaviour, then they become another person. And frequently you observe that in these people where they sort of change from being one person to another person.
I'm intelligent and I understand psychology, and people who insult other people are usually picking up on things that they do. And yes, he's talking about the other Jesuses who are claiming to be Jesus when they're not. But really, I think he is talking about himself. Now, I do think he is the Jesus, but I feel like the spirit is kind of pulling him in two directions. You know, on one hand, it's saying that he needs to be sane and, you know, not like the other crazy people. But on the other hand, it is also saying that you are this Jesus character and you need to get attention. And so I feel like he has kind of a split mind in a way. You know, one side of him needs to be sane and rational and, you know, to get his point across. And on the other hand, he also needs to build up a following and actually teach something. But how are you supposed to teach something if you don't actually know who God is and if you don't actually have the real truth? You know, I think this kind of character came out 2,000 years ago when he was this Jesus of Nazareth. You know, on one hand he wanted to preach the truth, but on the other hand he didn't actually know the truth, and the truth wasn't going to be exposed for a very long time. He just needed to captivate people's attention to get them to write the book. So I feel like he's kind of in this same sort of contradiction now that he was 2,000 years ago, and he wants to know the truth and he wants to help God and he wants to help the spirit. But I feel like part of his programming is also to lie a bit to get people interested in him. So yes, his insult of these other Jesuses is actually just him talking about himself.
That does not happen to me. I have never changed over my 2,000 years of life in the sense, you know, in that sense. I've never been overcloaked by anyone.
But one day I'll awaken him to his true spiritual self and he'll see what he's doing. When I say spiritual self, I kind of mean psychological self, really.
And also there is a common view, even with myself, that somehow God overcloaked me. And while I've entered a position of, I suppose you could say, closeness with God because of us being in better rapport due to my acceptance of God's love, I'm not overcloaked by God. I could never be God on earth, and I never will be God on earth. And so, you know, those kind of beliefs are also false.
If my love really has affected you, I think it's really just driven you mad, to be honest. But whatever, it's the same thing, right? Yeah.
You said you lived for 2,000 years. Now, most people are going to go, you're, what, 57, you said?
57, yes.
So if someone wanted to be critical of what you just said, right, And they said, okay, Jesus, how do we know that you're not overcloaked? How do we know you're saying you're the guy? If we went to the Russian Jesus, he might say, listen, that guy's overcloaked by another spirit. I'm the real guy. And we can do that all day long. How do we know you're the guy? Is there anything you can, or we just have to take that on a faith type thing? Or
No, I don't expect anybody to take anything on faith. And in fact, if you believe the guy in Russia is Jesus, then you're already taking it on faith. And to be frank, that faith is not based upon much substantial, because basically he's just regurgitating Bible teachings that came from 2,000 years ago that in themselves are also demonstrably false. So my feelings are,
I love this, by the way.
If you trust that, then of course you're going to be quite foolish. And I'm not suggesting people trust me either. What I'm suggesting is that they listen to all things that are being taught and analyze them carefully and use their logic and their brain that God has given them to determine the sincerity of a person along with what is actually happening to the person. Now,
I haven't given people their brains. I have given them a sort of human body, yes, but this body evolved from monkeys. So technically I didn't give it to them. It's just something that has evolved, and I've allowed this brain to form and to form more intelligence, but technically they have to receive the intelligence themselves. They have to seek the knowledge that they want to seek. They have to believe the things that they want to believe. So yeah, even saying something like God has given you a brain, not really. I've evolved a brain that you can use and is more usable, but technically you have to be the one that absorbs the knowledge that God doesn't just give you a brain. You're not like scarecrows in the Oz movie. I always had to take out a minute of your rant about the spiritual realm and the Jesuses that go into the sixth dimension or whatever. I don't want to promote stuff like that too much.
Every single person I have talked to who claims to be Jesus has always had some level of instability in them, and aside from myself, of course. My feelings are that you talk to them and you have the personal experience. You talk to them, find out, rather than just believing what the media says or what other people say. Now, if you believe what the media says or other people say, then I think you're pretty foolish too, because at the end of the day, my experience with the media has been they just fabricate things to suit themselves. And many of the things said about myself are complete fabrications, had nothing to do with anything I've ever said or done. And if that's the case with me, then it's highly likely that it's going to be the case with everyone else. So my feeling is investigate the claims and investigate the way of life, investigate the truth. I'm not the same as these other men because I do not wish to have followers, and I never have wished to have followers. I have what are called disciples, and disciples, if in the true sense of the word, is a taught one, a person who listens to teachings and then practices them themselves. And that's what a disciple is, a person who listens to a group of teachings and then through their own experience learns them to be true or not, learns them to be true or false. And what I'm suggesting is that people can engage their own experience here and decide whether, those things are true or false for themselves.
Yeah, I can imagine that Jesus of Nazareth being just like that, having a group of people and just sort of preaching amongst this group of people to believe in their own, teachings and stuff. But then having like the ancient press getting involved and transforming the stories into something much bigger than it actually was, even though this wasn't actually what you originally said. I pretty much think that the life that Jesus of Nazareth led was pretty much very similar to what you're describing there. This is how the Matrix works. It loves to repeat things. So if you want to do a repeat of what happened 2,000 years ago, only do it with you, and then after a little time expose that actually I'm the real Christ. We could do that. And yeah, you clearly don't really know the bigger picture or who Christ really is. So you're a little bit confused, but whatever. But yeah, sometimes change is good. You can change after. Don't worry. There'll be plenty of time.
So I don't need anybody to trust me or believe me. Although if you're going to engage a relationship with God, I am the only person on earth teaching the proper way to have a relationship with God.
That's quite funny. Do you get it? He's lying and he's saying that the only way to have a proper relationship with me is to lie about things. Although technically it's not actually lying, it's just mixing truth with lies. So there's some things that are true and there's some things that are false. That is the proper way to have a relationship with me.
Now, whether you believe that or not is up to you. But again, that can be proven through your personal experience if you decide to have one. Every other method that has been tried on earth is obviously a dismal failure because if you look at most religious faiths who say they all have relationships with God and so forth, the net result of those religious faiths has been more war, more violence, more strife, and even in families has created strife within families, and even abuse of children has been created to a large degree through following some of these faiths in terms of, the faiths recommending the violent abuse of children, for example, through what's called discipline. And so if you examine the outcome of all of these people who claim they have a relationship with God and then compare it with what a relationship with God should achieve, which I would believe should achieve more love and less war, more peace, less suffering. And if it's not achieving those things, then obviously no relationship with God exists. And so I feel quite strongly that needs to be recognized by all of humanity, not just the people in those religious faiths.
I think we can agree on that stuff. I mean,
I think we can agree on that.
Are you at all interested in producing a pure version of what you think people ought to know about your first period on Earth and what happened? Because I would like to write it if you do.
I am interested in producing such a thing. Obviously, to my mind, there are a list of different things of importance. And to me, my life is not that important. I feel there are much more important things than my life. For example, what humanity on Earth at the moment generally feels about God is a much more important issue to address than, the history of my life. But I do wish to obviously fix up or correct any inaccuracies that exist about my life, because many of the inaccuracies, unfortunately, have resulted in teachings that actually have confounded Christianity and caused more and more problems and divisions rather than actually helping it. And so, obviously, if you can correct many of these things, it may have the prospect of unifying belief systems rather than causing defragmentation of belief systems.
Honestly, I think it would do exactly that. If you come in claiming to be Jesus and you say that the telling of you is wrong, all that's going to happen is people aren't going to believe you. But when people start seeing the truth in me, they are going to believe you. And then they're just going to start believing whatever they want to believe. They're going to start reading the books, analysing it, trying to work out what it meant. They're going to realise that there are faults in the Bible, hence they're not going to see it as God's one and only truth. And then they're going to start turning to whatever they want, I guess, the media, the world leaders, celebrities, I don't know. There's going to be a bit of a chaos coming. They're not going to go on your side. They're not going to go on my side. They're going to go on their side, and they're going to listen to the voice in their head who they believe is their God, the God of their imagination. And I don't know what's going to happen, but I think we're in for a little bit of a war. But whatever, that's fine. I was a little bit like you 11 years ago. I believed that all I needed to do was just get people to hear me, get people to help me, and people would see my truth, they would rationalize, and they would come to the truth that, I am the truth, and everything will be fine. But it's been 11 years. People are, I don't know what they are, robots. They've been ignoring me. I feel invisible. I just feel like humans are not real, or there's something wrong with them. And there's so many people that are mad, and they think that they have the truth. They think that they're God's gift, and they're not going to be on anyone's side. They're only going to be on their own side. I've learnt this the hard way because I'm getting helped by no one. I am this Christ that everyone's talking about, but no one wants to see things from my perspective. They only ever want to see things from their perspective. And so this is what's going to happen. They're going to continue doing that until they realize there is something very wrong with them, and hopefully, they'll either go into heaven or will stay on earth and focus on being sane and logic.
That all being said, the most important thing we can talk about, I believe, is God and our relationship with God and our reception of God's love and the transformation of the human soul and what that gives us. But they are the kind of things that I taught in the first century, which were unfortunately distorted by the Bible account. So, yes, I am going to have to, at some point, and even in this discussion, at some point say, you know, yes, there are certain things that happened and they didn't quite happen that way that you're now believing they happened. There are other things that are not recorded that did happen. And then there are things that, you know, obviously didn't happen at all, that were fabricated. And it's important to understand the difference. And when you understand the consistency of love and the consistency of truth, truth is always consistent. It is not illogical. So whenever you see something in the Bible where I'm supposedly doing one thing on one hand and then doing something that seems almost the opposite thing on the next hand, then obviously there's an inconsistency there. And I'm not an inconsistent person, and neither is God an inconsistent being. So any inconsistency has to have been created through some other source other than the original source. And so, you know, this will help you determine what might be true and what might not be true in such accounts.
Well, let me know if I may be of a service. I would love to tackle that.
Yeah, Bob, it's an interesting thing to tackle. And I'm sure when we get a bit of time to spend face-to-face together, it would be a very interesting thing to discuss. And maybe even the discussions that lead up to the writing of the book can be recorded as well, because you'll find in those discussions, a lot of things become very plain that you can see through logic that many of the things claimed can't have actually occurred. Now, I can give you some examples of that. You know, the Sermon on the Mount, which is a very common thing quoted, you know, Matthew 5-7 and those kind of verses, you know, that are quoted frequently as if I said them all in one hit, in one sermon. That's not the case. They are actually recordings of individual things I said over, you know, many, many years that the Bible writers decided, in the case of Matthew, he decided to put them all together as if they were one sermon so that people could get the basic teachings in sort of one hit, if you like. And
here he talks about Matthew and all the book writers, but yeah, I'm a little bit confused because I believe that most of the books that were actually written 300 years after his death. Hence, I don't think he really met any of the people who wrote the Bible, or if he did, he met people who wrote things and then the final writers sort of took the bits that they found. So I feel like the writers who wrote Matthew, Mark, Luke and John weren't actually the writers who met him, but rather they were writers who had received scripts from people that did know him. So I feel like they're like kind of third party writers, and I don't actually know what he says about it. I feel like, I don't know, it's just weird. He just said a whole bunch of stuff, and I just feel like my brain has just blanked it out and said just say what I'm saying now. I don't know, but that's what I feel like I have to say, which is that I don't really promote or believe that everything he's saying is the truth. You know, he goes into so much detail about his life that I just don't think it's real. You know, I believe that I was a cave woman in my past life, yes, but my memory is very vague. You know, it's just small bits. I can't go into details about, you know, things people said or, you know, the language that they had. You know, I can't really say anything, and so it's weird how he goes into so much detail about everything that I'm confused on whether he's telling the truth or not. You know, I've seen him definitely lie throughout this video, so I don't want to add lots of lies. Basically, some of the lies are obvious, so I can add them, but I don't want to add lies that I might be the truth, might not be. I don't know.
And so they knew not only what I was like before I became one with God, but also what I was like after I became one with God. And so, you know, they had a personal experience of me that Matthew didn't have. So, you know, Matthew could only listen to those things through hearsay because he wasn't there. And in the case of Mark was a very young man when...
So I'm skipping the parts that I can't say are true or not true. I do think that he probably did have a child, because I like the idea of, you know, the average person having a child. And he goes on to say that he thought he had a daughter called Sarah, which probably is the truth, but she was fatherless. Anyway, this next bit is bullshit, I believe.
My question is that, were you spiritually risen and ascended on high, or was it something like a physical resurrection? That's my question.
Sure. Look, to properly answer that question, Derek, you've got to understand the way the human soul and its attachments, the two bodies, are designed. So let's firstly have a bit of an overview of that, because we need to understand that before I can answer your question.
Okay.
God designed the human soul. The human soul is a complete unit. You could think of it like a sphere, if you like, a complete unit. And when it incarnates for the first time, it splits in two, and one half of the soul connects to a spirit body and physical body that is actually created at the point of conception. And then the other half of the body goes to another spirit body and physical body, which are created at the point of conception in another pregnancy.
I don't believe that life starts at conception. I believe that the soul enters into the fetus round about the time that the water breaks. So yeah, I don't believe that this is the truth. I feel like there is a sort of mind and body side of the soul. Part of the soul is connected to the body, and the other part is connected to a sort of psychology side of things. You know, this is your ability to ration, your ability to think about things. You know, this for me is the spiritual side of things. How you see things, how you conceptualize, how you rationalize, how you use logic. And, you know, your soul does grow as your body grows, but your logic also shapes and forms, and they grow together. Now, it's true when your body decays and you die and you get a new body, you know, there will be a time where you will lose this logic and this rational ability, but by gaining a new life, you know, you will gain your logic and ability to reason back, and it will grow at a much faster pace because it is grown at a faster pace in its past. So if you have one life, you know, you might find that you are behind in classes throughout most of your life, but then you could die, say if you die when you're 18, you'll go back into being a new body and losing all your memory. But when your brain starts to develop and your soul gets a better attachment to your brain, you'll probably find yourself being more advanced than other people in your class. Why? Because you've already gone through this academic level. The only exception is if you're dyslexic. No matter how smart you were in your past life, if you're dyslexic, I believe dyslexia is a memory disorder, hence you will always forget which way a B and D goes. That is something I've been trying to get rid of all my life, and it just doesn't go. And Aaliyah wasn't dyslexic, so quite annoying how I have this. But yeah, it's not in two different worlds, it's not two different births. I don't believe that this is the truth. But if you want to believe that it's the truth, well, you know, this is Jesus. Who would you want to believe, Jesus or Anna?
And so basically the two halves of the soul split, and then two bodies are created at the point of conception. One is a physical form that you see in this dimension, and another is a spiritual body that you see in a different dimension. So they are two-dimensional existences. They look very much the same to each other. They both have genetic code. They are both structured in the same way, in the sense that they both have hearts, they both have brains, they both have limbs. You look identical almost in the spirit form as you do in the physical form. But the difference is that one form can be seen in the physical wavelength spectrum. So, you know, from the, you know, you could say red to violet spectrum, you know, the visible light spectrum. One form can be seen, and the other form is seen in a different spectrum. So there are two bodies created at the time of conception, and one half of the soul connects to those two bodies. Now, what happens when you die, and this happened to me as well, and it's going to happen to you and everybody else exactly the same way as it always has in history, is when you die, there is a cord. The cord connects from the base of your skull down to the tip of your spine. And this cord people refer to it in the spirit world as a silver cord. And it's a cord that connects the spirit body to the physical body. And what the function of that cord is to transmit neurological, you know, nervous system and neurological information, including information that comes from the brain of the spirit body to the brain of the material body. It transmits information from one body to the other so that you have a seamless existence. Now, when you die, the cord snaps. So what happens there is, instead of most of your thought, all of your thought processes and all of your motor processes and everything else that are controlled by your spirit body moving through into the brain of the physical body, instead of that happening anymore, because the cord is snapped, now it's fully functioning in the spirit body only. And so now you're a spirit. And this is exactly what happened to me as soon as I died. So shortly after, while I was on the so-called cross, which was actually a stake, the two bodies separated. My physical body died. The cord snapped, and I came to look upon myself, as people describe, even in hospitals and so forth, in what are called near-death experiences. It's all the same thing. You come to look upon yourself and you can see your physical body, and you're away from your physical body and you can see it. Now, in that state, because I was at one with God by this stage and I knew a lot about God's laws, I can create other bodies out of matter. And that's what I chose to do. So what I did to prove to the disciples that the so-called resurrection, which is not really a resurrection, but rather a transition of one life into another, I wanted to prove to them that I was still alive. And the only way that I could do that for them to see it with their physical spectrum eyes, if you like, was for me to create a body they could see. And so I created many different bodies, actually, which I appeared to them over a period of nearly 50 days. I did that. And I think in the Bible that you can see there's inferences to that, because they didn't recognize me in each case. And the reason why they didn't recognize me is I created a different body in each case to materialize, to demonstrate to them that I was still alive. The very first person I did that with was Mary, because I love her and she's my wife. And so the very first person I did that to was Mary. Of course, she wasn't believed at the time. And so I had to do it with others in order to, and I had to do it with men in particular, in order for anybody to believe that it was actually happening. So there was a period of time where I did live on earth through these bodies that I materialized over a period of 50 days after my death. After that time, I appeared to more than 500 people during that time. So those 500 people came to know and see that I was still alive. And I spoke to them about the same things I spoke to them. I reminded them of things that I spoke to them about before I died. I could connect to them because I could remind them of events that occurred in their life with me that only happened between me and them. And so they knew that it could only be me sharing this information. And as a result of that, they then came to believe that there was an afterlife. And this is also why Paul said that as there is a physical body, so too there is a spiritual one.
Okay, that story is clearly bullshit. But okay, let's go with it. Let's run with it. I'm happy with that. You tell your story and why you think you're Christ, and I'll tell my story. Okay, they're going to think that I'm Christ. Do they believe that you too had powers? Well, they're going to want to believe that because, if I'm Christ and you're like a Jesus, they're just going to think about themselves. Anyone who knows about me being Christ, they ain't going to be thinking about me. They're just going to be thinking, how does it affect them? If you're telling your story and I'm saying that you are Jesus and they are being taught and brainwashed to believe in Jesus and follow after Jesus, they're going to see your teachings as just as valuable as mine. And I don't really care what you say. I don't care what you say because I'm also going to say that you don't actually have the truth. But hey, maybe I'm wrong, I'm God, yes, but you don't believe that part, so maybe I'm wrong about other things.